Are you looking to leverage the latest and best ideas to grow your advisory business from the best minds in the industry? Join us every Wednesday at noon Pacific for our speaker series, featuring dynamic guests sharing real strategies for real results. Brought to you by The Best Notary, where we help estate planning attorneys grow their business with less stress and more success.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to yet another amazing The Best Notary TBN's advisory series. The purpose of the series is both to highlight and connect trusted advisors in the professional services space. Right now, I have Eli, CEO and founder of The Best Notary, and Stephanie, our guest speaker for today. So Eli, as the host of today's event, do you want to introduce Stephanie for us?
Happy to do that. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here. Stephanie Thoma is the founder of Connect with Confidence, a speaking coach, international speaker, and author. She has delivered over 250 talks at institutions and companies, including Harvard, Boston University, and LinkedIn HQ. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and Entrepreneur. She has coached startup founders, executives, and mission-driven leaders to speak with greater power, presence, and ease. How does she support founders? Strategic messaging for investor pitches, panels and brand building, storytelling that resonates with customers, teams, and stakeholders, coaching for keynote talks, demo days, and media appearances, confidence building aligned with each leader's style, guidance on landing and preparing for speaking opportunities. Whether new to speaking or ready to expand their impact on stage, Stephanie helps leaders show up as the voice their message deserves. With that, Stephanie, take it away.
Woo, thank you, Eli. Thank you for having me on The Best Notary. I'm excited to talk about public speaking. So let's see. I'll start by sharing an experience that I had. Let me know if you relate to this, where I was in a room at a networking event and there was an opportunity to say who you are and what you do. And as the people were going by one, I was wishing to myself that maybe, okay, maybe the lights are gonna like go out, maybe there's a glitch, maybe they will run out of time, I won't have to speak. So this was very early on in my career, and some people are actually stuck in that space of hoping that, okay, hopefully I don't need to speak, right? Because either they don't know what to say, or they don't know how to say it, or they're not feeling great while they're saying it. So we'll be able to go over different tools and techniques and strategies for you to use if you find that that is your perpetual state, or if you find that that's your baseline. So I'd like to just acknowledge that public speaking is the number one fear that people have before death. That's pretty intense, right? So studies show that people would rather literally be in a casket than be the person giving the eulogy at the funeral. So there's a lot of opportunity to make some reframes. And if you find that you have this uncomfortability with public speaking, or many of my clients actually, they look comfortable on stage, but they don't feel great up there. So we're going to go over ways to not just fake it and have people look at you and be like, they did a fine job. It's going to be more about people think, oh, wow, they did great. I really resonated and connected with the speaker. And you also get to enjoy the experience too, because what is it all for if it's not a shared experience, right? So my company Connects with Confidence is really about helping you connect with your confidence, but also connect with your audience. And although some of my thought leadership, my book Confident Introvert, is geared towards helping introverts break out of their shell, so to speak, and connect with more people, this information is not just for introverts. It may at times have an introverted skew. Introversion just means that you are more likely to get your energy from solitude and being alone versus the average activity or social activity for that matter. So I wonder, and let me know in the chat if you have ever heard that, oh, if you have nervous energy, just transmute it, just make it into excitement. And perfect, there you go. Just use it to your advantage. So that's something that I hear a lot, and to an extent, that can be helpful. However, I would like to know if you've ever had the experience of speaking in front of people right? So we have Stephanie that says easier said than done. But let's say that you have the experience of feeling nervous and just telling yourself, like, okay, I'm just going to turn it into something positive and I'm going to work with it. And then let's say if you've seen someone on stage where they seem a little bit manic and they're kind of like, hey, everyone, welcome. And you can tell they're kind of scared underneath the surface. These are the nuances that are important to be aware of when you're public speaking, because this goes along with fake it till you make it that I do not agree with. How about being embodied in how you'd like to show up instead? So this is where my Connect with Confidence framework comes in. And I'd like to walk you through step one through the end stage. And you'll notice that there is a holistic focus on you as a person showing up in a way that looks good, but also feels good. So the first, imagine a pyramid image. This is on my website. The very bottom is calm. So that's like our foundational piece hierarchy of needs, right? You want to have established a baseline sense of calm where you're then able to, on top of calm, is confidence, where you're able to show up with a sense of confidence and connect with people from that really grounded, rooted place where you're sure of yourself, you're sure of the value that you bring, even inherently, just being here on this planet. Hey, you have value, FYI. And then on top of that, confidence piece, connection. That's where you can actually connect with people from this place of not needing anything from them, including validation. And then the cherry on the top that so many of us are here for is to actually make an impact, where it's not just about, okay, I want to check off these boxes. And then at the end of my life, I'll say, oh, great. Job well done. It's like, actually, no, we want to enjoy the journey and enjoy the process. So when we get to a place of calm, that is the foundation. So I'd like you to check in with yourself in an average day. And if you are already public speaking, in an average talk, whether that be at a networking event, whether it be on a stage, whether it be in a boardroom, whatever your version of a talk is, maybe it's in a Zoom room. I'd like you to self-assess typically how calm you feel. And let's kind of get in the chat here, or if you're watching the replay, please go ahead and make a note for yourself, because there's some strategies that I'm going to share to help you embody a greater sense of calm that you can actually refer back to later. So one of them is getting to integrate a meditation practice. So I'm curious, does anyone here meditate regularly? Okay, we have a couple hands. How about meditate sometimes, not as much as I want? Okay, still have some hands up. Or how about, like, what are you talking about? What is meditation? Okay, so fewer of those, but hey, if it's new to you, let you in on one of the best personal development and professional development tools that exists if you would like to feel a greater sense of clarity in your decision making, including being able to speak on the fly and embody that sense of confidence that comes next after calm. So there are studies that show that as little as 12 minutes a day of meditation. So I host a weekly group coaching session, and I always kick us off with 12 minutes of meditation because studies show that that is literally the bare minimum that you can do and actually reap a lot of benefits from those 12 minutes. So and there is also something you can do. Let's say that you're like, okay, Stephanie, great. I'd love to have a meditation practice, but I'm giving a talk tonight. I'm giving a talk tomorrow. It's like, okay, we can still work with that. If you'd like to embody a greater sense of calm now, then breathing. And I know some of these things are so basic. I'm telling you to sit down and do nothing. Or if you can't sit down and do nothing, then go ahead and breathe. But there's a strategy and a technique to this. So it's called box breathing. And I'd like to invite everyone to do some breathing with me right now and maybe even self-assess on a scale from 1 to 10, how tense, how not relaxed are you feeling in this moment? And you can write it in the chat or make a mental note, write it down if you're doing the replay. And from there, okay, you have just a gut check. No need to get too technical here of what your baseline is in this moment. And now I'd like to invite you to, let's see, you can actually do this in a power pose if you're standing up before a talk, or if you're seated, then yeah, just go ahead and make sure that you're rolling your shoulders up and back. And I'd like to invite you to take 3 breaths with me. So box breathing is segments of 4. So we're going to count to 4, breathe through your nose, filling up your belly and lungs, and then pause that breath for another 4 counts. And then I invite you to audibly exhale through the mouth. And then
Took
once,
myself off of mute just to breathe with everybody. So I know it's kind of a weird experience to do this virtually. Do you want to walk us through one more time, Stephanie? I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah, no worries. Okay. So then once you've taken the breath out, just let that be there. And now we're going to do this one more time. Breathe in through the nose and pause and release through the mouth. And most of the time, all it really takes is having that intentional time. It takes less than 30 seconds to feel an exponential difference. So maybe make a note for yourself what, on a scale from 1 to 10, you're feeling in terms of your level of calm. And let's
So
see.
I would like to just ask real quick, Stephanie, I'm a very visual learner.
Yeah.
So this audio only presentation, I'll admit, is a little bit challenging for me. So can we go through the layers just one more time so we know where we're headed in this presentation? So we're talking about calm as sort of the foundational layer.
Yeah. And actually, if it's helpful to have an image, maybe it could be pulled from my website in real time.
Okay, great. I can go look for it.
Oh, great. So I'll put it in the chat. So you have calm, confidence, connection, and then impact. And don't worry, this isn't the entire presentation. We're going to move on to other things. But when it comes to confidence, so confidence is the belief that you can do something without necessarily having proof. Maybe it's something that you haven't done before, or maybe you have. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg conundrum, right? Some people say, okay, to create a sense of confidence in public speaking, it's like, well, you got to go ahead and public speak. It's like, or I think a really great stepping stone to feeling comfortable and confident public speaking is feeling a level of comfortability in networking. So I invite you to self-assess there how comfortable you feel entering new rooms, entering spaces where, let's say, if you public speak and you know everyone in the room and you feel like people are supportive of you, then there's a greater chance that you'll feel comfortable, right? But the nature of public speaking, since we are here to talk about public speaking, is that you're going to be interfacing with people that you've never met before. And it's your opportunity to make a first impression every time that you are on that stage or you have that mic or you're spotlighted in that Zoom call. So it's important to know that what you have to say is valuable. And I also, you'll notice in my presentation, I like to have an element of back and forth, asking questions so that I don't feel like I'm speaking at the audience. I like to gauge, ooh, what is capturing your interest, or what can I gloss over a little more? What can I devote even more emphasis to? So those of us that are here live, if you have questions that come up, I would like to see those. So feel free to.
Great, actually, perfect moment. Tanya, can you come off mute and come share with us sort of what you're thinking about?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. If you can hear me, this is a really kind of rare sweet spot in terms of difference. Like when I'm public speaking on a stage, I'm so comfortable. And if there's, I mean, I've never done it with a PowerPoint, but I have done like Q&As after like screenings, like film screenings. And I have no problem, like even college, I was a college speaker, like, like did tours and stuff. No problem in front of like big, what do you call it, like just rooms of students or whatnot. But when I got to, I don't want to say if it's corporate, it's just the different environment where I had to do a presentation in a conference room and everyone's looking at you in this kind of intimate space as you're like, I don't know, introducing a new product or whatever it might be. I would get these blanks,
Mhm.
like I didn't know any of the information that I was talking about. And I would just get really scared. And one of the salespeople would have to literally pick in and be like, "Oh, she meant this" or whatever. And I realized that there's a difference between larger versus intimate public speaking. And I wondered if you knew anything about that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So what you are bringing up here is it can relate to intimacy or not. So when it comes to the phenomenon of being the deer in headlights, where this is a lot of speakers' worst fears that sometimes for some of them actually comes to be. And I've actually worked with people after they've had an episode like this to help them alleviate the issue at the root level so that you don't need to experience that time and time again. But oftentimes, and this was actually highlighted in your example, it's not necessarily the size of the space or it's the people in the room. It's typically there's a sense of uncertainty around how you will be perceived. And
Yes. Yes, exactly that. I mean, I couldn't pinpoint it, but they're literally
yeah,
staring at you and they know that you know the information, and so they're intently listening. And then I would just draw a blank, like you said, deer in the headlights.
right. So it's a lack of emotional safety. So what the encouragement is there is if you are feeling a lack of safety to actually be able to be in your zone of genius, that's a sign that you're seeking that externally. And sometimes speakers get lucky. You look in the room and you see a friendly, smiling face. And even if everyone else is kind of, clutching their notepads and looking a little bit intense, then it almost doesn't matter because you're like, oh, great, there's that one person. For example, I always try to be that person if I'm in the audience. I'm like, hey, let's be the friendly presence. And I encourage, if you're a speaker, go ahead and do that for other speakers too. However, as you have experienced, you can't always count on that. And it's not that people are wishing ill of your presentation. In fact, it could be the opposite. They have such faith in your knowledge that they're just like, okay, come on, let's go, I'm ready. And then it's almost like that pressure is from these strangers, and the making of a first impression can be enough to have some people stop in their tracks. So that is another reason for focusing on the calm piece and focusing on the confidence building piece. A part of how I work with my clients one-on-one is subconscious reprogramming and getting a sense of self-worth really internalized as well, because oftentimes you can have these strategies and, I have plenty of strategies, but they need to work in tandem with an element of self-belief that is sometimes illogical. So I would invite you, if you're in a space and let's say you've already had the experience, like we just had the example of, oh, I was in this intimate space and it was even fewer people, but what the heck? I felt really uncomfortable and I was missing information and I had to get a colleague to call out some answers that we both knew I knew the answer to. So to avoid a situation like that, I'd like you to identify ways in which, well, maybe take a look at when you've been the most comfortable. Because if you've spoken at conferences, you've done college tours. So in those situations, maybe the professionals, they're emerging professionals, they're college students. And maybe there's an element of, oh, they're looking up to me. I can't really mess up. Let's go. And there's an element of maybe even playfulness that gets to come into play. Whereas it sounds like in this other room, there could be people. I know I've had clients that have identified that, oh yeah, everyone was actually a peer and that was scary, or everyone was superior and that was scary. uh,
That's what it is. I think that's what it is
yeah.
because I was new to the corporate environment and they're all suited up and I'm like feeling that I'm not faking it till I make it, but I'm like, this isn't my natural space. Like I'm an artist and like now I have to be in this role and I feel like I'm not being authentic.
Mm.
So I know the information, but I don't know how to present it in a way where they're gonna like respect, and I've lost that respect. I mean, for a second, obviously, the next time I came, I'd be more prepared, but it was really like sweating, super, super sweaty, because I
Ooh.
was like in that situation.
Yeah, Tanya. And
I just want to interject and just say, I think we've all been there. I think that's like such a human and basic kind of moment. I was actually kind of curious about techniques you've addressed, Stephanie. So what you can do to prepare, but in the moment, sometimes there's still something happening there. Do you have any suggestions on like what Tanya maybe could have done in the moment to bring
yes.
back a sense of calm, confidence, connection, etc.? Because I just, intimidation is just a part of life. We're going to notice differences between us and the rest of the world all the time. And sorry, Tanya, if you had more on top of that, I didn't want to cut you off, but I wanted to get my question in there too.
Yeah. Okay, so great question. So when it comes to feeling like a deer in headlights, and Tanya, something you brought up was that you felt like you really blew it. And sometimes, okay, sometimes there is a mess up and people all are are all noticing it, right? Where it's pretty apparent. But the question is, do you linger there? Do you allow it to be amplified? Do you make it mean something about you and the entire presentation, or are you able to move forward? So many people may notice in my presentation style, for example, I am not 100% perfectly polished in my presentation style. However, if I do ever trip up on my words at the forefront, like I know I have the information and I also know I'm here to connect. So if I say something incorrectly, then I pretty quickly identify that and say, oh, actually, here's another way to think of it. So it's not making yourself wrong. So I'd actually like to hear about the example of deer in headlights and how that presented for you. So did you, let's say, completely stop talking? Did you announce to everyone that you lost your train of thought? Did you say something that was completely different than what you meant to say? So I'm curious about that moment when you knew that it was happening.
What I did is I just well there was a little bit of a now that I'm remembering the situation, what kind of launched it is that the technical difficulty that was happening on the screen had to make me just be the presenter without my tools, right? Immediately. So I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I know this stuff, but that was like, I had planned on it being a certain way. And so when it didn't, I just kept making excuses for the tech rather than moving on and and they were getting annoyed because they just wanted the information and they were like, "Oh, you could fix the tech later. You obviously know the stuff." And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I don't. In my head, I don't. All of a sudden, I'm just totally blank because that was my guide. And of course I moved on. I ended up like I said, my colleague jumped in and said like two keywords, and all of a sudden I
Yeah.
started going. It wasn't like a comfortable going because I already had felt the embarrassment that these people went from 100% feeling like I knew to now questioning, does she really know? And now I'm looking, I'm feeling insecure because maybe they think I'm just don't know unless I'm looking at that. And I started becoming self-conscious essentially.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I ended up, kind of saving the presentation, but it wasn't the presentation I had planned and I had set up and everything was ready to go. And it just didn't go as planned. And my plan B wasn't like flexible enough. And that was it. I think my Q&A at the end ended up being good. It's like as soon as they asked me direct questions, boom, I was ready to give them the answer. But in terms of that presentation, yeah, I got lost. I had to ask later, like when we were driving home from the client visit. I waited a really long time until I finally asked the salesperson. I was like, was I really bad? And he's like, no, I mean, it was like a little bit like, uncomfortable when the tech happened and you kind of like fumbled it a little bit, but it was fine. I threw you a ball. And like he was just a guy, and he was just, I guess he was just like, these things happen kind of thing. And then I calmed down, but I felt like, oh my gosh, I ruined everything.
Mm, yeah, so there's an opportunity here. So let's say that if you're in the middle of something, and sometimes I gave examples of your mind just goes blank. Other times the tech goes blank, and that's an invitation to have some things in place, anticipating that that could always happen. So the ideal scenario is that without skipping a beat, let's say they say, "Oh, the slides don't work," or whatever. Then you don't make that the focus. You simply notice, and maybe you say, "Oh, hi, tech support, the slides went down," and then you say, "Oh, and as I was saying, so here's an example of," and then you kind of without skipping a beat, you continue with the information. But it sounds like you had a dependency or reliance on the slides. So there are a couple things that I'm going to let you know that you could do next time in the moment. And then I'll go into a couple of things that you could actually do in preparation. So if you're already in that situation that's happening, and I mean, ideally, you would have some sort of bullet pointed, it could be an index card that's easily accessible to you that has keywords, kind of like, how you were thrown that lifeline by your colleague that gave you the keywords. And then you're like, oh, I know what I'm saying now. Or sometimes there can be, it depends on the speaking engagement, right? There could be a teleprompter where it depends on if you are more visually inclined with your cues or verbally inclined, right? Because sometimes the best slides, in my opinion, are just an image, and that image reminds you of a keyword or a key phrase, and then you're able to go from there. Where speakers can get tripped up more is if their slides are almost verbatim what they're saying. And there are a couple things with that scenario where people can maybe be taking pictures of the slide and they're ignoring you a little bit because they're really focused on the information. That can actually be a way that speakers kind of hide because it's like, oh no, don't look at me. Look at that slide with all that text and go ahead and keep reading. Where, especially for really technical things, I'm going to introduce another point that I was actually leading up to a little bit earlier. It's going to be beneficial. And I know now we're going to the creation of the presentation, but instead of having a slide that's super intricate, the simpler the better. Some people think, oh, I need to really break things down into the minutia so that people have a thorough understanding. When, let's say, I don't know, if you're a marketing whiz, if you have a PhD or doctorate in something, then it's not about bringing people exactly to your level and like having them know exactly what you know, but trying to distill it. Sometimes it's about keeping it high level. And in the author world, there is an emphasis on keeping things at a fifth grade level, which, any words that are beyond that, this is for your stereotypical business book like Confident Introvert. Um, a fifth grader could read it. But are they reading it? Maybe not, right? But the same goes for certain presentations because it depends on the room, if there are specialists in what you're talking about or not. What you want to do, I had a client who was speaking, and this can also lead to being tripped up more, right? You're more likely to misspeak if you're trying to break down a lot of really complex topics where meeting people where they're at if you're in a space where they may not know some of the foundational information. So, let's say that if someone watching this is in a situation where they're like, oh, shoot, the tech just stopped working. What do I do? This is where, at a high level, what I'd like to invite you to do is memorize. Let's say that you have, so for example, in this presentation, I have 4 key pillars, and I know those like the back of my hand: calm, confidence, connection, impact. So from there, it's like it can become visual in your mind where you either have a visual or you're like, okay, this is segment 1 of the presentation, segment 2, segment 3, and you want to have stories attached to each of those segments that you can come back to. And let's say that your mind goes completely blank and that outline is not coming to you, then that can actually be a good time to always have a cup of water nearby. This is not the time to scramble and be like, oh my gosh, like the tech just did this, or oh, I don't know what I'm going to say. Like, first of
Mhm.
all, please don't announce it to everyone because, people might be able to see that the tech is whatever. Another thing, please don't announce to people if you're feeling a little under the weather or sick. You want to keep the focus on the information. That's why people are there. They're not there to listen to you go through your confidence journey on stage. Like, but that's what some
Oh
people
my
take
gosh.
people to.
I think you're so right about like keeping the focus on the information. Speaking of which, as today's moderator, I just want to bring us back and do a quick time check. We're about halfway through the hour, and Stephanie, the other Stephanie, managed to help find this visual from your website. And this is the pyramid of calm, confidence, connection, and impact. And we've spent quite a lot of time on calm, but I also want to point out that Stephanie, like most people start here, right? Most people start at the second level when
Hmm.
they're building, or working with someone on public speaking,
Yeah.
right? And so this calm is part of that really secret sauce that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. There is a lot of talk in this modern age of vagus nerve resetting and getting to a place where people, I think in recent years, have been more attuned to if they're burnt out, if they're running on empty. And some people have tried to make that work for them. But there is the way that I work is like, hey, let's actually feel good about what we're doing while we're doing it for sustainable success. So going into that more confidence focus, we have kind of, through Q&A, thanks, Tanya, we've talked a little bit about confidence building already. And and yeah, when it comes to building confidence, one of the quickest ways to build public speaking confidence is to public speak. So this isn't to say apply for a TED Talk or a TEDx talk today and get on the stage as your very first talk. This is about leveraging low-hanging fruit. So are there any networking groups that you regularly go to, or any organizations that you're already a part of? Or could you even practice giving a talk in front of a group of colleagues that you trust? And sometimes, we'll have opportunities. I remember relatively early in my speaking career, I had given my talk networking for introverts one time, and I had inquiries for private work together. And I was also invited to give a talk in Tokyo to help people network in America. And I was like, oh, shoot. Okay. So now I'm being asked and tasked with helping a group of people, across the world network with Americans in a general sense. And it was one of those situations where my confidence paired with the preparation of the self-conducted studies and the presentation and everything got to come together, and I said yes to that opportunity as my second time giving that talk. So it's it's about being discerning and not jumping off the deep end before you're ready and having a negative experience where, let's say, you don't really present the information in a way that people either receive well or understand or get value from. You want to be pretty sure that that's going to be the case. Before I gave my very first keynote that then led to more opportunities, uh, I was actually practicing it alone. I was saying it to myself and just conversationally. I mean, as speakers, you need to take actions that not everyone's going to take. Who wants to be in a room talking to themselves, saying the same presentation over and over and over again? But that is how you get to a place where, oh, the tech doesn't work. Oh, that's fine. It's muscle memory. You know this stuff. So when it comes to confidence, and when it comes to having a talk, the stereotypical segment that you'll have is around 60 minutes, but I also encourage go ahead and pick a segment of that, and maybe that will be 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and be prepared to give that segment at your local networking group or whatever sort of groups that you're in. If you can gain comfortability and practice, that's going to set you up for success. And, networking is a natural part of this, especially if you're going to events that have speakers. There is power in, and this is for those that are watching that are interested in booking more speaking gigs. So there are certainly ways that you can go about this that are less personal, right? Where you could go ahead and have a LinkedIn strategy, an email strategy, hire a VA. However, what I have found to be a part of my secret sauce that has been helpful is being well evented and going to events where people that can reap the most benefit from what I speak on are there. And then I'm meeting the organizers, and I'm not going up to them right away saying, hey, I'd like to be on your stage next. It's more about just like, okay, like I really appreciate this event, and maybe like giving them the positive feedback of what you're noticing. I also do have an events background as well, so I kind of
So
tie that in.
I want to interject here when we have a question,
Yeah.
but before we get there, what you're talking a little bit about is this whole public speaking thing. I think a lot of people that I've met approach it as an intellectual enterprise. But when you're talking about how you practice it in the real world, that is physical. That is a physical thing. And then, people ask about like, where do I put my hands on things like that? So, it takes the learning of the whole being in order to, this is a craft and you have to invest in it. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our intellect gets us to certain places, like being an author, right? Like being the kind of person that is an ideas person and likes to have structure. However, what I've found is that speakers that live in that place purely are not optimizing the opportunities available to them. So it's about doing the research, knowing what you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it, and then actively putting it into practice. Empirical research, we could say, right? It's time to graduate into actually getting that muscle memory and building that confidence muscle by not being afraid to be imperfect. And again, is your goal surely relaying the information in a very clear, digestible way, but also connecting with people where I do think that society is shifting. This is kind of a higher level topic, right? Where it's not just about, oh my gosh, look at that person on that stage. Like, I can never imagine being where they are. And sure, some people will put you on a pedestal regardless, but it's about humanizing yourself and actually speaking with people after a talk. I love to have Q&A. I love to uh, even have talks with people before a talk. If I'm hired by a company, for example, I want to talk with those people that would like to talk about networking, for example. That's typically what I speak on. So there's an opportunity to lead with curiosity and to know that it's not about you. You are the orator. You have the information and you say it in a specific way that can change the lives of some people that hear it in a way that will resonate, that not everyone else will have that capacity to do, right? Because you have a way of, you could relay the same information, but you say it in a slightly different way. And it creates an aha moment for someone that they may not have had if you were not there. So it becomes about being of service, certainly in your career, but also from a real human standpoint. When you lead with, oh, even if I make a mistake, I have this set amount of time on this stage, and it's about, I want these people to get this information. And hopefully you're also excited to share it and you have a structure in mind. So you're taking them on this journey of information. And then it's not it becomes less about, oh my gosh, where should I put my hands? And it becomes, I mean, and let's answer that question actually while we're here. How about you want to keep a nice open body posture, and having your hands visible inspires more trust in other people. So you don't want to put your hands in your pockets. You don't want to like have them behind yourself, but you don't need to do jazz hands the whole time either. It's a happy of, sometimes if there's a slide, I might want to point to that, or even little things like, my book's right behind me. If I mention Confident Introvert, I might motion behind me, for example, things like that.
So jazz hands, I've been known to have odd hand gestures, and I'm really self-conscious about that. I want to take a moment here and go back to Eli. Eli, you had a question, and I don't know if we've completely blown past the topic, but do you mind bringing that forward right now?
Yeah, so Stephanie, we met through an organization called Innovation Women. Tell us about that organization, how you got to it, and what other similar organizations exist for those that are trying to build a speaking career
Yes.
or
Okay.
speak
So,
better.
yeah, certainly. So, Innovation Women, goodness, they've been around for a decade. I've been a part of their community for 5 years on and off. And it's so funny. I don't remember exactly how I got connected to it, but I will say that that's a great platform to begin with if you would like to get more visibility in terms of local conferences. And I know that I've booked a few, like the Small Business Expo in Los Angeles, and a few different niche conferences, like the Grant Professionals Association. I'm like, oh, cool, in Denver. And yeah, there are lots of niche opportunities there. Um, and I've also been a part of e-speakers. And I don't know how this company is doing at the moment. Impact 11, I have a lot of friends that are in that community. And I would say you can join one of these communities. However, it is not totally necessary for your success as a speaker. Another way that you can go about it is looking at different conferences that you're interested in and go onto their website and check out, oh, so there are conferences that has speakers, and go ahead and check, or even if there's a speaker archetype or a person that speaks on a topic that you speak on, and if you're thinking that there may be a step or two ahead of you, then you can bookmark those conferences. And I do think for newer speakers, and enduring speakers alike, it's going to be less of an upstream situation. It's going to be easier for you to speak at places that are either virtual or within where you live. So that you're not necessarily investing too much time, energy, and effort to travel unless that is being comped. Early career, it can happen, but that's not always offered. So there are other things that you may want to consider, such as if there's professional video taken. That is something that will be really instrumental for your sizzle reel. So yeah,
So
there
I want to pause here real quick. So there's so much information here. I want to kind of, bottom line it just a tiny bit so that we have time to cover the rest of your framework, which I'm excited about. But there are ways to get started small and ways to kind of pace yourself so you gain a little bit more exposure, a little bit more experience. There are forums and communities for folks who want to build a speaking career. Is that, I mean, is that sort of the baseline there? And, you know, thinking more strategically about the recordings and things like that.
Yeah, I think at the heart of Eli's question was around different ways that speakers that are listening to this can be connected with different speaking opportunities. That was my takeaway. So yeah, in a nutshell, there are plenty of online resources. Innovation Women were both members of that, so I think that's a great place to get started. But it's not, in my experience, once you get speaking, there are other opportunities that can come even from that first speaking gig and going to events and going into Eventbrite. And, there are other ways as well.
Thank you for that. Tanya, you had your hand up briefly before. Not sure if you still have your question. Do you want to bring it forward?
Oh, I did. I just wanted to kind of elaborate on what is it Jess was speaking? Just one of the things that really helped me too outside. I mean, because like I said, I feel comfortable in really big spaces. Um, and one of the things that I really leveraged was being a panelist before being a speaker, or actually, I mean, I did it before or after. I mean, at the same time, but I could say being on a panel does help you strengthen that because you are, like you said before, put on a pedestal. You're on above the stage. There's a panel there. It might be like 3 people and a moderator, or they might ask you to moderate. And so those are all like very micro or smaller speaking engagements. And I felt like those really strengthened my own knowledge and helped me network at the same time.
All right. So I know, Lee, you mentioned going into the framework, and we're almost there, people. We're almost there. So we went over calm, we went over confidence. Now, when it comes to connection, we have been alluding to a few different strategies for connecting. However, and this is something that people say a lot, where it's like, give before you get. However, do not give in order to get, because you could be very disappointed because it doesn't always work that way. Whenever I think of the act of giving in a networking human connection sense, I know and I trust that sometimes things come around and things come back around to you when you do nicer kind things, sometimes not from the exact same source. So it's not about putting yourself in a situation where you're inconveniencing yourself severely and then you're thinking, oh well, since I did that for that person. Here's the thing: if you get in the habit of severely inconveniencing yourself for people, expecting that, well, now those people owe me, they might not understand how much of an inconvenience that was and may not have a level of appreciation that you think they should have. So just keep your side of the street clean. And there are plenty of things that you can do that are not going to really inconvenience you that much that could actually be so helpful to someone. It could be making a connection. Let's say that you are making connections and building relationships with event organizers that are behind the scenes. You could ask if there's any certain type of speaker that they're looking for from, your speaker friends network. Maybe you could put feelers out, or, let's say they want assistance with the event. Maybe, I don't know, you met someone that could help them out with their event setup or something. Just it's important to be genuine in asking, hey, how can I help? And then offering, I call it planting seeds, where you don't always know exactly where things are going to come from. But as long as you are, it's kind of like we've heard the metaphor of giving from a full cup. And it's almost like when you're giving from a full cup, then you're getting replenished from just the feeling of doing that, but also then you're more visible with people, you're more top of mind, and there gets to be an opportunity where at some point people actually ask, oh wait, like what's something that you're working on, or what's a goal that you have? And that's where you get to say, oh well, one of my goals is to get on more stages. These are the types of stages that I would love to be on, da da da. And it gets to be an organic building process. And then in my experience with certain clients that get in the right rooms, not necessarily rooms with that many people, by the way, it's like you can convert clients from that into your business if your business is not purely public speaking, right? And there, so I like to pair strategy with intuition, because you can strategize what you're going to do, but you don't always know exactly how other people are going to respond or not respond. So it's important to be rooted in that. And then when we go to impact the tippy top, one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate of bringing public speaking into your business, if you haven't already, especially for those founders that are like, let's say, mid stage or beyond, that know that, okay, now it's time to have an element of thought leadership. It's being a steward of a message. What is the why behind what you're doing? And it can be, it can kind of add that extra element to what you're doing in the world when you step out from behind the curtain and you do a live on LinkedIn, for example, or you get to talk about how you got to where you are. If you've had, let's say, success in a certain area, and it's this cycle of giving back. And when you are public speaking, you are having the opportunity to speak one to many, depending on the platform, whether it be virtual, whether it be in person. So if you know that you are here on this planet for a purpose greater than yourself, what better way than to infuse public speaking into how you show up and what you do with your time?
Really, really powerful. Question, Stephanie, like, what's been your kind of worst moment that you ended up turning into a success?
Yes, I have a vivid memory of being invited to give a talk. This is when my keynote was networking for introverts. And I read the room. So I asked, it was about 300 people at this corporation. I asked, who here identifies as an introvert? Show of hands. And out of 300 people, I think 3 people raised their hands. And then I asked, okay, who here identifies as an extrovert? And the other 297, yes. And so I had an opportunity there to, in real time, reframe the presentation that I was going to give. And I found out quickly after that the person who booked me was an introvert, but they didn't necessarily ask the colleagues, and it was a sales team as well. So this actually makes logical sense, right? That it would be a more stereotypically extroverted room. But in real time, I got to say, okay, well, now I have another question for you. Who here has a friend who's an introvert, a family member? Or, I got to make that content relevant for them. And then also say, well, and by the way, this information is actually relevant to all personality types, because we all have moments where our confidence is tested, or maybe we'd rather stay at home than go out networking or whatever. So I got to kind of tweak the setup. And then when I was going through my slides, of course, I still gave some of the introverted statistics, but now it was through the lens of, oh yeah, and who has, let's say, a brother who maybe takes a long time before they answer a question. They're not verbally processing, they're thinking through their thought process, and then they're going to say it. So it's not like they don't know the answer, they're just simply processing internally and things like that. So I'd say that is certainly an example of reading the room and because it would have gone a different way. I think the engagement would have been lower had I not asked that initial question of who identifies as this, who identifies as that, and then gotten to tweak it in real time.
So you're using the word engagement in just for my very own brain. I'm going to be selfish and ask, is that connected to the impact part of the top of this beautiful pyramid? Can you speak a little bit to what is impact in
Mhm.
your world?
Yeah. Okay. So the word engagement is almost like a stepping stone from connection to impact. Because when you're connecting with people, then what does that look like? It's engagement. And then is there an action that you want people to take? Is there a feeling that you want them to have? The impact would be, so let's say that there's a talk that's geared towards networking for introverts. An example of a success from that would be people that connect at the event and actively network at the event using the strategies, and then people that are dedicated to taking some sort of action after the fact. And there are a few ways to do that. You can have it's surely a good idea to have a lead magnet, capture emails, give a free gift, something that will actually help the process that you've walked people through. And then you're able to nurture those connections that you've made through speaking one to many with additional resources and help. Um, and also, so the teacher side of me, I'm not a teacher, but sometimes I feel like I am because I like to give homework and I say, okay, so your action item is to make one new friend per event and to get one event on your calendar per week. And some people like to have that element of structure. So for those that like that, that can be another measure of success when if you are able to track how many people actually take the action items that you're recommending.
Hi, Stephanie. And do you have any recommendation for like virtually engagement? Because sometimes it's easier to engage people when you are in the same room rather than virtually.
Okay, so are you asking specifically about making connections online in a virtual space like
Yes.
this?
Yes. And
Yes.
public speaking online.
Okay, so when it comes to making connections online, you can do this whether you're the speaker or someone in the virtual space. There are a couple of ways, and it depends. You can send a direct message. So let's say that the chat is active. Assuming that the chat is active, the first question that is typically asked is, where in the world are you? And let's say that you're in New York and you see someone else says they're from New York, you can private message them. In some Zooms, you can say, oh, hey, I'm in New York too, would love to connect, and you can provide your LinkedIn, you can provide your email, either one. Or if it's a group that you feel is more curated, uh, or even something like this, you can at some point, towards the end or even the beginning, you have to feel this out. You can say, "Hey, I'd love to connect with other public speakers. Here's the best way to connect." And certainly if you are the speaker, it's great to have something like a lead magnet to capture emails as well and to help people stay connected. Um, and so in this case, one of the things that I would recommend, I have a community called Unmute Yourself on LinkedIn for professional speakers. So, I mean, hey, I'd love to invite you into that community. So if we can get that link, and then my LinkedIn is associated with it, so you can feel free to add me, just send me a message that lets me know, like, hey, I saw you in the Best Notary webinar, then I know where you came from. So those are a few ways to leverage, and you'll notice not many people do this. You might stand out, but that's okay because you'll open the door, so to speak. And if you comment that publicly, certainly if you are the speaker, do this, but if you're an attendee, then other people might say, "Oh, actually, I want to connect too. I'm open to it." And from there, I personally like to have brief connection calls with people so I don't have a bunch of LinkedIn connections of strangers that I've never met and never will. So you can decide to have that connection point, and then if it does matter to you like it matters to me, you can say, I'd love to know my connections. Would you be open to a 15-minute connection call to see what we're up to in the world?
Oh my gosh, perfect segue as we come to the end of this time here. Like, we're getting so much great interaction. It's a small group today, but it's a very lively one, and this is a very important topic. And I sincerely hope people who are watching the recording after this are getting as much value out of this as we are. But how do we connect with you, Stephanie? Like, how do we kind of continue this journey? You know, what are your recommendations? Where do we go from here?
Yes, so you can go to stephaniethoma, thoma.com/gifts. And there are an array of different free resources for you focused on networking. And if you join my email newsletter through getting a gift, then I have public speaking resources that I send out every week that go over things like how to navigate deer in headlight syndrome and different things like that that speakers typically navigate. So that's one of the best ways. Also, go on over to linkedin.com and you can look up my URL is Stephanie M. Thoma, and then you'll see the Unmute Yourself speaker community, or go ahead and search it in the search bar if you have any trouble there. We're about to start a visibility sprint next week, so you'll have an opportunity to engage with custom prompts to help you feel more comfortable being visible.
I've got so many ideas. I hope a lot of other folks have as well. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm going to hand things over to Eli so you and he can wrap things up.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah, for moderating. Thank you, Sophia, for putting things together in the background. Thanks to our guests, Tanya, John. Stephanie, this was amazing. I have left with actionable ideas on how I can expand my speaking career. Still early, but could always improve. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to maybe having you back on at some point in the future as we grow our audience. And I want to invite everyone to join us next month for another lovely event. First Wednesday, noon PST. I believe we next month will have Jen Duncan, who's going to speak actually on the 18th of this month or next month, Sophia? This month. Okay, so we're doing our first bi-monthly event. So 2 weeks from now, we'll have a conversation about copywriting, marketing, copywriting. Jen Duncan will be speaking, automating flows for emails and funnels. So Leah, this is a person I had talked to you about. Looking forward to having her on. Now that our system has improved, I think we might be having more of these 2 speakers every single month. So fantastic work, Sophia. Thank you, Stephanie. Looking forward to seeing everyone next month, actually 2 weeks from now. And then after that, next Wednesday.
So for this team, please stay on for our debrief, and thank you for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Best Notary Speaker Series. Come join us on Zoom every Wednesday of the month at noon Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified when new episodes are released. This speaker series is sponsored by The Best Notary, your trusted document concierge from Maui to Maine.